Welcome. I'm Cindy Edwards, Chairman of the Jacksonville Onslow Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. On behalf of the Chamber's Governmental Affairs Committee, I want to thank you for joining us for today's Forum Onslow. The Governmental Affairs Committee works with government agencies on issues that impact our business community. We monitor legislative issues that impact local business, promote collaborative partnerships between business, government, military, and education sectors. We also prevent forums, like this one, to create awareness on topics that are important to our entire community. I want to thank our media sponsor, the Daily News, the City of Jacksonville for the use of these facilities, and the City of Jacksonville Media Services for broadcasting this important forum. I also want to thank our candidates for the Onslow County Board of Education who are here with us today. Our system of government only works when quality individuals give of their time to serve the residents of Jacksonville and Onslow County. Our corporate sponsor for today's event is Duke Energy. At this time, I want to welcome Millie Chalk, Duke Energy's District Manager for Government and Community Relations. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and on behalf of Duke Energy, welcome to Forum Onslow. Duke Energy has a long history of partnering with the Jacksonville Onslow Chamber of Commerce in sponsoring this forum, focused on candidates running for Onslow County Board of Education. Educating and inspiring our students to be their best is critical for all of us, as our students today will one day be our future leaders. Being an informed voter is our responsibility, and of course, voting is a privilege. I look forward to an informational session as our candidates outline their priorities for the Onslow County schools. Duke Energy has a proud tradition of leadership and engagement in our communities and is proud to sponsor Forum Onslow. Now on to our candidates.
Thank you. I'll be your moderator. My name is Elliot Potter. I'm with Thunder Country Radio right now as co-host there in the mornings if you get up that early. But most folks, you folks know me, a lot of you I work with back in my days with the Daily News. And I've been doing these forums for a long time. I actually remember doing them when we had primaries in the Board of Education race. And of course that changed for a while. And now we're going back, I guess, back to the future or back to the future to the back, whichever way you want to call it. But there has been a way in a change in how Onslow County voters elect members of the Board of Education. Like I said, for the past few years, I really don't remember exactly how long, but the school board race was nonpartisan, which meant it didn't involve the political parties. Open seats were then filled in the spring election. So when we had a vote in the spring, that was it. But now the candidates are required to file according to their party affiliation. And if necessary to narrow the field, we will have primary elections to decide a party's nominees. And then the nominees from both parties get back together and face off with each other in November. For this May, we actually do have a primary in the Republican race, because 4 of you have signed up for one of the 3 seats that are available. So we got to go through a little bit of a process of elimination here. The Democratic candidates who will appear on the ballot in November, Joel Churchwell and Donna Gargett, I think they're both in the audience. And like I say, they will appear in the November election, on the November election ballot. And the chamber will schedule another forum prior to that election that will involve them and those who win in the Republican primary. So back to the rules of the evening, which we hope to keep simple and so that we can have a very informative, enjoyable evening. We do think this is an important forum in our community. It has picked up some steam and gravity over the years in terms of, because it is on G10 TV and a lot of folks watch it. We think it's an important evening for us to let people know how you feel. As in previous election cycles, we've asked the public to participate, and some folks have submitted questions prior to tonight. Some other members of our Chamber Government Affairs Committee have submitted questions, and we've had some people who've used the blanks or the cards out and back and submitted some questions tonight. So, and then I've come up with a few for you. So we'll have a combination of those things. Our format, and we have a format that calls for an opportunity to sort of a round robin where we'll go through and ask the same question of each of you. But at the end of a round, if you have an opportunity, if you have a question that you would like, or a statement that you would like to make, or a point that you would like to make in rebuttal to a point that maybe another candidate made, or perhaps to expand on something that you would like to say, you have 2 cards in front of you. So you have 2 times during the rounds of questions that you can do that. And so I'll give that opportunity for you. Okay, so now you have 90 seconds. Most questions will be 90 seconds. The rebuttals will be 30 seconds, and your very first question will be 2 minutes. And that's because I've asked you to include introductory material with that question. Let's see if there's anything else I need. There are some basic rules of engagement that I would like to go over, which is this. We don't like to be this, the Chamber has long-standing policy, is that, we hope that this is a forum and not a debate. What that really means to you is we want you to answer the questions that we pose to you rather than debate each other. We feel like that goes better that way. It certainly goes faster that way. And so we'd appreciate if you would adhere to those rules. You will see a yellow light when you're nearing your time limit. The yellow light means that there will be about 10 seconds left. When you see the red light, we would ask that you simply finish the sentence that you're stating and stop. That may mean that it's a little abrupt, but in fairness to everybody, that's what we'd like for you to do. So, any questions about that? We kind of went over some of this earlier, but we'll go forward then. And I'm going to start with the first question with Mr. Hudson, and we will move right down the row, and then I will do sort of randomly go in some different directions so that everybody doesn't follow everybody else, and we'll see how that works. And I've told you, if I forget, if I miss somebody because I'm trying to do this in my head, and like I say, I've done this a long time. If I've done this in my head, if I forget somebody, just raise your hand and say, I didn't get a chance to answer, or you already called on me, and I won't feel bad about it. And you won't have to answer the same question twice. Okay, Mr. Hudson, if you'll start this round of questionings. Give us a brief summary of your personal background, your leadership record, and your own assessment of what you think people expect from a school board member.
Well, my name is Jeff Hudson. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. I graduated from Richlands High School in 1988, and with the tunes of Duran Duran playing in the background, I went off to college at Campbell University, got my bachelor's degree in government, went on later got my master's degree in public administration. And it was only through that educational process, which began right here in Onslow County, that I was able to begin my career in public service. Through the years, I've held numerous jobs, all of which have been in Onslow County, from town manager of Holly Ridge to assistant county manager, deputy county manager, assistant superintendent of schools, county manager, and now CEO of our water utility. About 10 years ago, I was the assistant superintendent here in the Onslow County Public School System, and my area was the area originally called Business and Property, or Auxiliary Services. So I wasn't in the classroom, but I was on the leadership team of the school system and saw the day-to-day activities that went on in an effective school district. And I learned a lot from that. I believe that working with different boards through the years, whether it was a town council or county commissioners, and also working with members of the General Assembly through time, has given me a perspective on what it means to be an elected official. I believe that first and foremost, the Board of Education is, of course, a policy board. They're the governing board of the school system. And it's their job to set the tone and the direction, the general guidance of the school system. And I believe we have some specific challenges in that regard in the next several years. And only by working collaboratively with our partners are we able to meet those challenges. Resource challenges, growth challenges, security and safety, all of those things, along with making sure that we recruit and retain the one point of success or failure in a classroom, and that is the great teachers that we need.
Thank you. Mr. Lanier, you need to go back over those, that question. I'll do it real quickly. A brief summary of your personal background, your leadership record, and your own assessment of what you think people expect from a school board member.
Sir. Well, of course, you know my name is Bill Lanier. Growing up through life, I faced my various challenges. Grew up poor, joined the Marine Corps at age 17, and spent 20 years doing that. During that time frame, I had been a equipment manager. I had been a troop leader, trainer, formal schools teacher out here at Camp Johnson. In that career, I had gotten into behavioral health care for 5 years, which is basically taking care of those who have physical and mental challenges in the community from cradle to grave. I was recruited out at Trexler Middle School to, say, add my expertise to the classroom. So it wasn't a hard transition. I started working in the social skills section and did that for 12 years. What I bring to the table as far as this leadership role goes is the experience of working with people over various issues over time. As far as those things that are significant challenges, they are in fact the expansion of the community and the involvement the stakeholders in the community have. It involves everything from school size, class size, funding, all the way down to social issues, which seem to permeate everything these days. These are all challenges and all things we have to take into consideration. Policy is very important. It is a board's responsibility to ensure that sound policy is implemented at all time and that there's transparency at all levels.
Thank you. Mr. Reddick?
Okay. Recently, I had some cards printed. It kind of gives my friends and citizens of the county an idea of just what I'm about. And my campaign slogan I chose for the Board of Education is putting students first. And I think as long as I ask the two questions, and I think of all the things I may say here, this might be the most important. Is that decision I make in the best interest of the students? And number two, how will this decision impact the educators and citizens of Onslow County? I don't have any doubt if I do those two things, then I can be successful in this position. And also on the card on the back, I have three words: experience, knowledge, and commitment. And I really think, Elliot, part of the question, I believe, was, what is my leadership all about?
What's your record? Yeah.
My record. And I think my record, my experience is leadership. As a teacher, a coach, a curriculum developer, as a principal, all of those things have really added up to what I am today, a leader in the field of education and also a leader in the community in many ways, I think. The knowledge, I think, that's required here is that we have a good idea of what the policies, what the procedures are, what are the state laws that we need to follow as a member of the Board of Education. I've been in Onslow County for 48 years. I have a vested interest in the Onslow County school system. And I really believe what you can expect from me is that I will do everything I can to grow the community and as far as partnerships are concerned, and to support all school staff and members of the Onslow County system.
Mr. Williams?
Thank you for the opportunity of appearing today to talk a little bit about myself. Those people that know me know that I don't have any problem talking about myself. I've been on the Board of Education now for just almost 4 years, and it has been quite an experience. I've worked on both sides of it. Let me tell you where I started, though. I started out my education up in Michigan, going to one-room classroom, a one-room schoolhouse, through grades 4 through 6, and I probably learned more about education in those 3 years than I have in all the other years. I've got a master's degree in public administration. I have worked at the second largest school district in the United States, in Los Angeles, the Los Angeles Unified School System. and I was a Deputy Inspector General for Investigations. I'm retired Air Force. I spent 20 years in the Air Force. I've been married for 48 years to my lovely wife, Alice. We have 2 children. We have 8 grandchildren. 7 of them are right here. 3 of them attend the schools here, and 1 is a graduate of the school here and also a graduate of the community college here. So I'm familiar with what we need to do in the school systems. Finance, transparency are the 2 things that I have primarily been running on. Just to make sure that everyone understands that this little 2-minute presentation that we have here right now is not enough to get to know the candidates. Even if we spend an hour or hour and a half here today talking with the candidates, that's not enough time to get to know the candidates. You need to go out and you need to interact with the candidates. You need to go out and find out. I've got a little piece of paper up here that shows what my website is. It's electbobwilliams.org. I think it's important for people to go out there. I'm probably the only candidate for a public office that you'll ever see that has his full resume on his website. Most people, you have to dig and dig and dig, and when you get to the polls, you still don't know who you're voting for.
Okay, thank you. And I'll give you first shot at the next question,
Thank you.
and then we'll work our way down, okay? What do you see as the most significant challenge facing the Board of Education, and what solutions would you propose to address it?
It's difficult to only have one as the most difficult. There's several issues. The primary issue that we have is a social issue that we have throughout the United States, maybe throughout all the schools that we have. Society's changed, and with society changing, those problems come to us. Single-parent families, kids not getting enough, or parents that are having to work all the time, they're not getting enough time to work with their kids. The single most problem that we have right now in Onslow County is facilities. And that's a problem because we are a growing county. Our population, when we do the census in 2020, will probably be well over 200,000 people in the county. We're a growing county. We don't have enough schools for the students that we already have in the system. Education is important, but getting the kids into a proper classroom is paramount to their success. We can put them in a portable classroom. I don't believe the portable classrooms are adequate for a good education, but in order to get good schools, we have to pony up the money to do that. And I see the problem of financing new schools, elementary especially, where we're overpopulated, and issues of middle schools as well.
Thank you. Mr. Reddick, let me repeat the question.
Okay.
What do you see as the most significant challenge facing the Board of Education, and what solutions would you propose to address it?
I think Bob hit on certainly one of the 2 most important. Since he talked about facilities, I'll just mention something about school safety. I think it's on everyone's mind right now. I've done a lot of reflecting on this, and I really believe that there's no problem that we cannot solve as a united community. I am totally convinced of that. But what it's going to take, it's going to take a lot of leadership. It's going to take people who are willing to come together, who are facilitators, people who don't mind some give and take. The partnerships that we really need in schools these days tend to be more along the lines of how can we get all the professionals, and I'm not talking about just law enforcement professionals, but how can we get professionals like school nurses, social workers, all the people who work in the school like guidance counselors, mental health professionals. How can we get all these people working together to take a proactive approach to identifying children who may have the propensity to do something bad in school? I think we can solve it. It's just a matter of leadership, making sure that schools, the superintendent, the community are all on the same page. We can't have surprises when it comes to safety. We've got to have people who know what to do. We've got to have a collaborative approach.
Thank you, Mr. Reddick. Mr. Lanier.
The most significant challenge I see is growing student population. It's akin to the way that the communities are popping up all around the county. They tend to be disconnected, which makes the districts just difficult to manage. The solution's not new and it never ends. It's a necessity to constantly find resources and funding at the state level, the local level, federal agencies, community stakeholders, anywhere you can possibly find funding and partnerships that can support the school system in order to expand. But in addition to that, it's also important to utilize technology and economical use of the resources we have. Sometimes we can outsource schooling to those parents that want to opt into those systems that give them opportunity to homeschool, to school in alternative ways, which will actually reduce the burden on the school system so that it doesn't have to expand so rapidly. It can actually expand slowly using alternative sources.
Thank you, Mr. Lanier. Mr. Hudson,
Would you repeat the question?
I sure will. What do you see as the most significant challenge facing the Board of Education, and what solutions would you propose to address that challenge?
Thank you. Well, Ronald Reagan said, status quo, is Latin for the mess we're in. So it is true that we have significant challenges facing us. And I would say the primary challenge facing us is to be able to support the teacher in order to best serve the student. And supporting the teacher will come in 2 or 3 different ways. First of all, you do have to have the rooms to put them in. Right now, we have over 201 classroom trailers on our campuses, with 53 more coming in the future. We have to have buildings. We have technology. Have teachers receive all the training they need to use that technology to enhance the classroom experience. But we also need to support the teachers in giving them more time. I've been out to a lot of Bojangles restaurants and Hardee's early in the morning. I've talked to a lot of teachers, and what I hear from them is, money is great. We appreciate the teacher supplement, but give us time to be able to think about the planning that we have to do. Is it possible for us to change schedules? Is it possible for us to use our existing resources in the schools differently to give teachers a moment during the day to plan what they need to do next? All of that is challenging the status quo, and I'm entirely willing to do that to support our teachers, who in turn are the primary reason that we exist, to teach those students in all of our classrooms around the county.
All right, thank you. Let's go on to Mr. Lanier. I'm going to ask you to respond to this question first,
Certainly.
and then we'll work our way down. And then next time I'll try to keep Mr. Hudson from being last all the time. He was first at the beginning, but we'll fix it. But Mr. Lanier, how do you feel about the decision to return the Board of Education elections to partisan elections?
I think it's an excellent idea. All the voters in the community have a right to know where their board stands concerning their views. When people vote for any particular candidate, those people are that candidate's constituency. It's not that anyone else that didn't vote for them doesn't deserve an equal shake in the process, because when it comes to education, it's an equal playing field. But certain value sets and certain ways of doing things shouldn't be left out of the equation, because certain ways are adopted just intrinsically by the system itself. It's very, very important that each of us consider our stand as far as governance in general is concerned. And that's where you get a definite difference in the way that people's ideologies fit in to how they vote and who they vote for. Me, I'm conservative. I'm all for seeing that things are done in a specific way, that it covers all stakeholders regardless of party, but it does not take an individual stand in saying, well, I feel this way, and if you don't feel this way, I disavow you. We can't live that way. We can't school that way.
Mr. Reddick.
Okay. The common universal activity of education should not be politicized. As a school board member, I think we have some specific things that we are tasked to do, and that's to make policy, to manage the financial affairs of the system, to provide facilities, make sure that every child has a basic education. I really don't care to represent Democratic or Republican or independent children. I want to represent children. I want to represent all the children, all the educators, and all the citizens. I think if we just simply put children first, politics will yield to whatever's in the best interest of Onslow County.
Mr. Williams?
Thank you. I hear this a lot. There shouldn't be any politics in education. In theory, I would agree that 100%. In reality, there's politics in everything you do. If you go get an ice cream cone, if you want chocolate or vanilla, you can find 2 or 3 people to argue over whether or not that's the correct choice. Politics have been in every other organization, partisan politics especially. It doesn't matter what organization you go. If you go to the state board of elections is a partisan thing. If you go to the assembly, if you go to county commissioners, all of those offices are partisan elections. But somehow, when you say the Board of Elections, or excuse me, the Board of Education shouldn't be a partisan race. And I just have never been able to understand that. One of the greatest challenges that I had running in a nonpartisan race 4 years ago was trying to convince people, because I was new to the area, where I stood. The only thing I could rely back on was the fact that I've been a lifelong Republican all my life. And a lot of people asked me, what is your partisan that? Even though it was a nonpartisan election, they kept going back to that because the premise is that the party stands for something. Otherwise, we wouldn't have distinct parties out there. So if you belong to a party, it gives the voters at least one more element that they can rely on, hopefully, to make an informed decision.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Hudson?
We live in a transient community. Every year, thousands, tens of thousands of people come in and out of Onslow County. And because we live in that transient community, some people that are here don't know who others are in the areas of public service. So I believe that having a partisan election does help educate voters in terms of some of the things you might stand for. And I also believe that it has helped me in this election. I'm able to tell people very early on if I'm, what my party is, which is Republican, and that conveys some things to some people. Of course, not everyone likes it, and that's okay. But I would encourage the voter to go past whether you're Republican or Democrat and go to that website. Do your internet research. Find out who the person is and what they've stood for. Because in my case, being Republican doesn't tell you necessarily that I'm also very conservative on moral issues, and yet I am. It doesn't tell you that I grew up in a not so wealthy family, and yet I did. That I had challenges, growing up, and that, thank God, by the grace of God, I was able to overcome those with a lot of help from my family and others, and stay here in Onslow County, my home. So there's so much more to a person than simply their party, but the party is very important in allowing that individual to relate to others and for that person to be known by others.
Thank you. And now this for this next round of questions, Mr. Reddick, I believe you're the only one who hasn't gone first, so you'll get that chance, and we'll move down to Mr. Williams and then back to Mr. Hudson and Mr. Lanier. I hope I can keep that straight. How would you describe your level of commitment to maintaining art, music, and physical education programs in light of funding and space challenges facing our school system?
Thank you for asking that question. As a principal, I honestly, in fact, I remembered doing workshops on helping other schools to appreciate and make the best use of those so-called enrichment teachers, or those specials, as a lot of the teachers call them. Art, music, PE, and those schools who are fortunate enough to have dance and those kind of things, I think it's a tremendous advantage for students to be exposed to those types of programs. There's all kinds of studies that indicate that children who are involved in the arts, particularly band, chorus, the visual arts, all kinds of studies indicate that those children perform better later in life, not only in the post-secondary area, but throughout life. I can't see us, I hope that it never happens, that we have to We have to get rid of those programs that are so important to children. Not every child is going to be a math whiz like my grandson, for example. But let me tell you, that child, when he comes home and he tells his mother what he did in art today, it's amazing to see his face light up and see that there is more than one way to educate a child. It's not all math, reading, and science.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I'll repeat the question for you.
Thank you.
How would you describe your level of commitment to maintaining art, music, and physical education programs in light of the funding and space challenges facing our school system?
As a photographer, I'm very much in favor of keeping the arts. I can't sing a note, can't play an instrument, but those people that can, I envy. I think it's important, and I think it's important because people learn in different ways. Physical fitness, if you just look at the world the way we are right now, especially in the United States, fast food restaurants, obesity is a major epidemic in this country. The three programs that you have mentioned and that we're talking about today are as integral to learning math, learning history, or any other educational program that we might have in the system. Those programs are currently, and have in the past, used as pawns for political purposes, and that's the only reason they come up. There is a much integral part of the educational system in today's society as anything else out there. And I'm tired of listening to people say, we have to cut this, we have to cut that, we have to cut this. Because people simply use it for political purpose in order to get a leverage on trying to get additional funding. I think there is every bit of as important, and there's no way that we should even consider eliminating any one of those.
Mr. Hudson?
So some of my favorite memories from high school was performing in Hello, Dolly and Little Abner. And that was one of the first times that I actually was on stage in front of hundreds of people. And it taught me to be able to speak publicly, and that's carried throughout my career. Now, that was way back then in the 80s. Today, I can tell you my family and I are consumers of the school system. My son, Ian, is a rising freshman. Ian's been at Newbridge Middle School. He's in Guys and Dolls. He's playing the part of Marlon Brando. He's first chair saxophone, and I believe that those experiences in music all through the years have helped him become the math and science student that he is now. He wants to be an aerospace engineer, and my wife and I are praying that that's the case. So we're really happy that he has had the experience of being a well-rounded student through music. Now, we've also talked to him about the importance of athletics, about PE and remaining healthy. And I can tell you that as he's looking ahead toward maybe Campbell University, maybe NC State if he's going to engineering, we've told him that not only must you have the academics, but you have to be well-rounded. You're in competition with the world, son. And so athletics and music and the fine arts, along with a really solid academic background, is what you're going to need to compete. So I am all for it. Thank you.
Mr. Lanier?
For a while, I've been thinking about this, and I'm kind of a practical person. I've thought about those programs. High on my list is physical education. It's a no-brainer. It's something that should be standard, and all students should be involved. Whether it's organized athletics or not, at the basic level, elementary level, kids should be afforded playgrounds and facilities of which they can just run it off and keep the pounds off and keep active. But as you get into the higher grades, you get into more organized activities and athletics. As far as the arts in general, I had a negative view on it until recently. I visited the Council of the Arts, and then it dawned on me that there's an intrinsic value where the return on investment for the community can be high. It can benefit people at so many levels, both mentally and physically, as well as intrinsically for their well-being. To be engaged in these things, the Council of the Arts is just one of those vehicles that just impressed me, that veterans are being helped by the arts as well. So I would be inclined to partner with community stakeholders in enhancing these programs as well.
All right. I'm gonna remind you guys, you got your rebuttal cards up there, so, use them wisely, but use them. I'm gonna start this round of questions off with you, Mr. Hudson, and we'll work our way down again as the original order. The funding formula currently in place between the Board of Education and the Board of Commissioners provides a definable level of funding from the BOC to the BOE and provides for capital funding for school growth. And I had a chance to ask the person who submitted this question. And of course, that formula is one of the many things, and it's tied to some of the funding this level is providing in other counties. But do you support the funding formula, or would you advocate for changes? Mr. Hudson.
Well, as I'm one of the original authors of the funding formula, I support it. And here's why. If you're a county manager, as I was, there's this long-standing debate in North Carolina, or I should say the frustration is not quite as bad as Duke versus Chapel Hill, but there's the counties versus boards of education, and the uncertainty that happens budget year to budget year. Now, after facing that for 10 or 15 years, when I finally became county manager, we were able to go across the aisle, as it were, and talk with the Board of Education about coming up with some objective measure by which we would know how much that we were paying, tied to an objective measure, nothing subjective, and the Board of Education would know how much they're getting. Now, in times of growth, since it's a per pupil allocation that's tied to the state average per pupil allocation by all counties to all school systems, we knew that we're heading toward average. And we were okay with that because initially we were not average on a per pupil appropriation. We were at the very bottom of the 115 school systems in North Carolina. Now, as we face growth, we still have that ability to look toward an objective measure, and both the county and the school system can say, with this many more students, we're going to have this much money. And when surprises come up from the state, the county knows the school system isn't coming back. It's still tied to that objective measure.
Thank you, Mr. Lanier.
Well, all things financial are tied to all things budgeted. All things budgeted require a sound formula for maintaining consistency. If there is, and I'm sure there is a formula that's out there that allocates funds for the school system by way of the county government, then those things should be adhered to just as much as any other principles are for financing. I spent a lot of time as a church treasurer. I spent a lot of time in the United States Marine Corps with vehicle maintenance issues. And I sit here and I'm proud to tell you that I'd rather be a church treasurer than a finance officer in the United States Marine Corps. With being a church treasurer, everything's stable, everything's sound. I can see where all the moving parts are. So the fundamentals of sound formula is the way to go. If things change, formula can be reevaluated, but there always has to be stability whenever it comes to finance.
Mr. Reddick?
Okay. I certainly do support the joint education funding policy. I believe it was 2014, Jeff, is that right? 2014, I believe, is when it began. And I really believe that was probably the first giant step that this system took in conjunction with the county commissioners to make sure we had a predictable, continuous growth formula that would allow us to do the things we need to do in this county. The needs, I think Bob's already mentioned this, the needs are certainly there. We're growing by 300 students a year. There are some capital outlay projects that have to be attended to. And I too, I don't want us to be average. I don't want us to have an average formula. If times allow, if the financial situation of our county, of our state, of our nation allow, certainly we need to go back and revisit that formula. It may be, I think it's, like I say, it's a great thing, but no one in this room wants us to be average. So we had to continue looking at it. Bill said it was a sound formula. I 100% agree. Anytime you can predict what you can do in the way of facilities, doing what is necessary to meet the needs of the children in this county, then I say let's do it.
Mr. Williams, how do you feel about the formula?
I think it was a good beginning. But just like all good beginnings, I think you have to go back and revisit it from time to time. That formula is broken into three parts. The formula that we fund the majority of the pupils with is a major part of that, and I think that is a sound part of the formula. The formula also, though, goes into deferred maintenance, and it also goes into capital assets budgets. We need to revisit schedules. When we set this up 4 years ago, we could not predict what our population would be right now. I didn't set it up, Jeff did, along with the other members of the Board of Education and the Board of Commissioners. However, you've got to go back and revisit it from time to time and make sure that it gets tweaked. We need to build schools. There are a particular order of schools that was set out in that original formula that don't apply today. We need to go back and look at that and see if we can readdress how the schools and what order they get built in. Other than that, I think it is a sound process. It is a leader throughout the state for other boards of commissioners and boards of education, and it is constantly referred to in meetings that it is a good, sound process. Good start. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, and I'm sorry, a rebuttal.
Thank you. I'd like to just follow up on that last. It was a good start. And part of the formula says that annually, the Board of Education and the county commissioners will come together and look at the needs of the community from a capital construction standpoint. Right now, we have Carolina Forest Elementary School that's 137% of campus capacity, overcrowded by 37%. Dixon Elementary School, the same way. Hunters Creek Elementary School, 32% over. Southwest, 24% over. And the list goes on. The fact is, people have found out Onslow County is a wonderful place to live, work, and raise a family. And they have come. So I believe that it's very important for us to work with the county commissioners. There's $113 million left on the table to build in the future. 5 new schools over the next several years, starting with a Dixon Elementary or Catherine's Lake Elementary. But people don't arrive in Onslow County in neat packets, 5 here, 5 there. So we have to adjust the building plan to meet where people want to move.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, we'll move on. And Mr. Williams, I'm going to ask you to start, and we'll move down the table as we did before.
All right.
And I want to open up an area of concern. I know that everybody's talking about after recent events, and it was already been, as a matter of fact, already been mentioned by one of you, and it concerns the school safety issues and the recent, particularly those that have been spurned by the attack and the shooting that we had down in Florida. After that, we had some things that went on in Onslow County schools. We had, it really differed by school, exactly what happened. But overall, we'll call it a demonstration or a walkout. We have a couple of questions from the audience about that. One is, how do you keep political activities from becoming part of public education, i.e., the walkouts? And the other is, if there are administrators or leadership in the schools that don't follow school policy in responding to the walkouts, should the Board of Education hold them responsible?
That's a
Now, I know
mouthful.
that's a mouthful, and but generally, just what is your response to those? What happened? I believe it was March
14th.
14th. Yeah.
I've been very vocal on this issue, both in the public and within the school system itself. I believe that no matter what side you stand on the political aisle, political process has no part in the student's education. We should not be using children as the pawns for a political purpose, and that is what I saw happening on March 14th. A well-organized group of people out of New York, a social media group, partnered across that and pushed out a program through social media across the United States. Onslow County was affected by that process. The way that I found out about it was through an email when we were releasing a press release. I objected to the process, I objected to that, and I had made my objections known a couple of weeks prior to that, that we should not be part of that. Free speech is an inherent right of everyone, no matter whether you're a school children or whether you're a teacher or a board member. We all have that right. But we also have policies within the school district that say when and where we can exercise those rights. And it has been adjudicated by courts what we can and cannot do. We need to follow the courts, we need to follow our policies, and we need to make sure that our personal preference in politics don't filter down to our students and affect their actions.
Thank you. Mr. Reddick?
You know, sometimes when societal issues become so great that students see a need to show their concern, to voice their opinion or their views, I think it is the responsibility of the schools and parents to provide guidance. You can't let students run the school. You can't let them walk out the doors because, you know, there are going to be consequences. But on the other hand, like Bob mentioned, we have First Amendment rights. We have to model what it means to be a good citizen, and we have to model what it means to be a responsible citizen. And that does not mean disrupting learning. It does not mean doing your own thing. With adults in the building and with parents, with leadership at the Board of Education, I believe things like this can be learning opportunities. There's no reason in the world why an 18-year-old child, not a child, but an 18-year-old person in school should not have the right, and for that matter, 14-year-olds. Why can't they have the right to at least voice their opinion and exercise their First Amendment rights? The key to this, and I think Bob alluded to it, we have to be on the same page. We can't have somebody in the leadership position, you know, whether it's the superintendent or his designee, to say one thing and the principals are doing something else. We have to have total communication so that everybody knows what to expect and everybody's on the same page.
Thank you. Mr. Lanier?
Yes, the issue was initially about school violence and how we come up with a means of tamping it down so it doesn't affect everyone so much. It comes down to that stakeholder issue. When the schools make a concerted effort to keep the community involved in what the school is doing and an interest in understanding how the community functions, everyone is going to be working toward a common goal to ensure that school policy is adhered to. And it's a matter of educating everyone on school policy, understanding what the dynamics are in the stakeholders' lives. Part of my platform is a school system free of distracting social issues. Just like the issue of religion comes up so many times in schools. And it's always said that teachers cannot advocate for their religion or any particular religion, but we see it's constantly being done concerning other religions under the guise of social order or social construct. It's very, very important that we understand that these other social issues fall into that same heading. Our school system is not a battlefield. It's a place of learning. These issues have no place there whatsoever.
Thank you. Mr. Hudson?
I believe that it's appropriate after a national tragedy that every person is able to express their grief, to turn to their faith, and you know, just express what's on their mind. But at the same time, we must realize that students in a K-12 environment are not in the adult world yet. They are at a campus for a specific purpose, and that is education. So in the context of a school system, being able to relate what's happening in the world, whether it was the Challenger disaster when I was young or whether it's a mass shooting today, it's important that that's done appropriately on campus in the context of instruction through the principals. But I must say this, leadership matters. And if you have a case where direction, very clear and appropriate direction, is not set at a district level that all principals can follow at all schools, and you have a situation where every principal goes a different way, Some principals might have had, the right answer, and some principals may not have had the right answer. Well, it's part of leadership that you don't leave anyone hanging out to dry. You don't leave anyone out on a limb. So putting a team together and knowing how to address these things on a united front and appropriately is very important. Then you push that guidance out to all schools.
Thank you. I'm going to stay on this subject a little bit. I'm not going to wear it out, but I do want to talk a little bit more. And Mr. Lanier, I ask you to answer this question first, and then we'll go to Mr. Hudson, and then Mr. Reddick to Mr. Williams. How about that? I'll keep parting the Red Sea here until I drown. Okay. There's been a lot of talk lately about hardening the schools to make them safer. What are your thoughts about what can and should be done to do that?
As far as hardening schools are concerned, there's easier and less expensive ways of hardening schools. You can put abutments in front of major entryways to prevent vehicle access. You can come up with inexpensive Kevlar curtains that are about the size of doors. It would help if all schools were constructed of cinder blocks and concrete, but it's not always the case. But as far as that main entry to each classroom and egress, it's sound policy that during the day that teachers have those doors locked, that at any given point during the day when people are entering and exiting the school, that they primarily have appointments to be there in the first place. As far as SROs are concerned, you have to take into consideration the makeup of the community, the propensity for violence in that particular area, and then the sheriff can be partnered to adequately space those resources where they're best needed. There's not a simple answer to it all, but there are various simple ways of hardening a school without going too far. One of the issues is arming teachers. Most teachers would prefer not to be armed. There's a big liability in that where a gun might get loose, accidental discharge, things like that. And then again, policy has to be geared with special rules to accommodate it. It's a very complex issue. It has to be explored, but there are simple ways of getting it done.
Thank you. Mr. Hudson.
Thank you. In the last 25 years, I've been responsible for a couple of facilities that was a high priority in terms of security. First of all, renovating the old county courthouse. Secondly, design of the courthouse that's being constructed right now in downtown Jacksonville, and also the new Albert J. Ellis Airport, all places that you want high security. Also, as assistant superintendent, I was able to construct a couple of elementary schools with our team there. Meadowview Elementary School and Stateside Elementary School incorporate a lot of new thought in terms of security. One integrated school building, a central courtyard, things where you don't have to have a lot of kids walking across campuses. In terms of what can be done with the other schools is not as simple. We have 37 different school sites, and some of those are very old. The oldest in continuous use, Richlands Elementary School, built in 1926. Kids have to walk across the campus. I've had school personnel tell me, don't worry about the active shooter. What about the car that can veer off course? There are other things to think about. First of all, I think that we could do a vulnerability assessment. We're the home of Marine Corps Base Camp Lejeune, MARSOC, the air station. There are lots of people locally, in addition to law enforcement, that can come on our campuses and help us assess things. In addition to the brick and mortar stuff, what about the practices of the school system and personnel? Are we following our own security protocols? Are we challenging people before they enter the building? All of things that we need to take a look at to make our schools safer.
Thank you. And then we're going to go to Mr. Reddick.
I think so. There are a lot of safety precautions and safety measures in effect right now. There are certainly every school I've been to recently, there's at least a call button at the main entrance. Not all our schools are designed that way, so we may have pods of classroom buildings. It's very difficult to maintain that hardened security that we're talking about. But one thing we can do is that we have to absolutely make safety part of the culture of our buildings. We don't have any options to that. All the safety procedures we have, and some of those procedures are not for publication. We have some really neat things in effect, I've been told. So I think we need to continue with that. but honing all the safety procedures, making sure that all schools are following the best practices that are that are available as far as safety goes, making sure that kids know exactly what to do in any situation. All of those things we can do. It's just a matter of us making the commitment. It's a matter of someone taking the leadership to make sure that we implement all these safety features at every school as best we can.
Mr. Williams?
Thank you. We've got a lot of dynamics going into this process right now, political points aside. We've got schools out there that have portable classrooms that have different considerations than the main classrooms. Not all of our schools have resource officers. Not every school has the ability to lock it down like some of the newer schools. As we design new schools, we can design those in. But the societal issues that we're dealing with today weren't around in 1926 when schools were built. In 1926, we were probably still bringing our long arms to the schools to go hunting afterwards. There's a variety of things. Number one thing that we could probably do is increase the resource officers. There's been a lot of talk about arming teachers. I'm not necessarily in favor of arming teachers because I see a problem with a teacher being armed and then trying to have to take down a suspect who's a former student or a current student. There's issues with that process. There's a lot of things that we can do, though, and we need to explore all those options. If we harden the schools, if we make sure they're locked down, if we make sure we have resource officers, but I also would advocate that all shootings happen in gun-free zones.
Okay. I'm going to kind of get into that right now and I'm going to break a little bit from the routine, so follow with me here. You guys have been holding on to your rebuttal cards. So if you want an opportunity to respond to this question, raise your card and you can respond with given the 1 minute time limit. How about that? Because I do want to tie this into, I do want to get everybody that wants a chance to talk about this has a chance, and that is, do you support allowing the arming of classroom teachers or other school staff, and under what conditions? And I'll start with Ms., well, hold it, I said you got to use your card if you want to respond. Thank you, Mr. Reddick.
No, I do not believe teachers should be armed. Do I think that we should have highly trained SROs, resource officers? There could be an individual or two in the building, not a classroom teacher, but someone in that building with specialized training that could offer even more security. But as far as teachers packing a gun, no. I think the message that is sent there is just unfathomable to me to think my history teacher with a gun. But I do believe that we can take action. I think with the right amount of training, and particularly with our community, with so many of our retired folks and people who have military background, I think that we do have an opportunity to maybe look at some of those people.
Mr. Williams.
I don't agree with the wholesale arming of teachers, but I do agree with if a teacher has a concealed carry permit with additional training in close confrontation, that teacher could, and we'd have to change the legislation at Raleigh, we'd have to change board policies, there'd have to be a lot of things that go into the equation. We have a lot of teachers that are retired military. We have some teachers probably that are retired law enforcement. We have some people like myself that are retired military and retired law enforcement that currently carry and carried for a living. There's no reason why that couldn't be implemented in a safe and sound way. This idea that because it's a gun-free zone, that the criminals are going to just shy away from that. Every one of these shooting incidents at schools has been a current or a former student.
Anybody? Okay. All right, well, we're going to move on. And a question, Onslow County Schools And I'll start with you, Mr. Hudson, and go down. Onslow County Schools receive a large number of grants and other funding to implement federal programs. Do you support keeping those grants? And, or perhaps any changes in how those grants are handled? And please explain your answer.
Well, Onslow County Schools receives a tremendous amount of money in federal programs. The Elementary and Secondary Education Act, Title I of the federal government gives a large amount of money to schools, $6-7 million, and that provides direct aid to schools, particularly in areas where there's low income or a high number of children on free and reduced lunch program. I tell you, I was astonished to learn in my studies the number of children that are in a free and reduced lunch program. 46.5% of all students in Onslow County Schools participate in a free and reduced lunch, which is astonishing to me, and that is a federal program. It provides about $7 million, and with commodities, maybe $8 million out of a $10.5 million budget. Without those types of federal programs, the school system would have some severe financial hardships. Now, anytime you have a federal program, a federal grant or a state grant, there's always the question, well, what strings are attached? And in fact, there are lots of strings attached with federal programs. I believe that it would be very difficult for the Onslow County property taxpayer to say abolish federal programs. And it would be also very difficult for the homes that currently receive assistance in the form of hot meals for their kids from a free and reduced meal program, or schools that otherwise would have to raise money for some basic supplies. So we have them, we have to monitor them and make sure that they're being applied accurately.
Mr. Lanier?
I support keeping those programs. It's the strings that bother me. If those strings are not attached to certain social agenda, I'm all for keeping the programs. But if it's for engineering our community socially to ensure that one side of a specific issue or ideology is pressed upon people who might not agree with it and have a right not to agree with it under the Constitution, then I'm not for it. But it's up to the board to determine how to make policy fit the dollars that they pursue.
Thank you. Mr. Reddick?
Certainly, we should keep the grants that we have now. The school nutrition program is certainly something that makes a tremendous difference for a lot of families in this community. The Title I money, I've had a lot of experience with that. That money primarily is designated to hire a reading specialist, to promote reading, to buy materials that otherwise schools may not be able to afford. To put books in children's hands and then for them to be able to read those books, to take those books home and bring them back in a little compartment, a little bag, that's an important step for a lot of young kids. And so for the grants to be effective, we have to be real careful about a couple things. Sometimes we can have the tendency, and all school systems have to face this, we can't let federal programs supplant what we're doing. If they supplement, that's fine. But if we start letting federal money take the place of supplant, then we're in some trouble because now we are neglecting what we should have been doing anyway for the children. So I do believe that grants are important, and not only the federal grants, there are other grants that we take advantage of which benefit our children tremendously.
Mr. Williams?
I have been an advocate for eliminating the Federal Department of Education since I can't remember when. The Onslow County 2017-18 school budget this year is $273,141,000 and some change. That's what we started with. Currently, it's up to $286 million. It's a $12 million difference between what we started with and what we've got. Out of that $286 million, the federal grants are only $16 million. The child nutrition program is 10. So if you add those together, it's less than $30 million out of $286 million. For the hoops that we have to jump through in order to administer the federal programs, we could easily bring that back into state issues and allocate those monies if we need them in a state budget. We would eliminate one layer of oversight that, in my opinion, we shouldn't be doing. Education is local. It ought to be staying at local. The decisions we make with regards to our community and our children should be what we make at the local boards of education, the boards of commissioners, or through the state legislature.
Mr. Reddick.
I am willing to jump through hoops when it comes to $32 million.
Okay. Mr. Williams.
I'm not willing to jump through hoops for $32 million or any other amount of money when the restrictions cause us more difficulty in administering programs that local communities should be deciding the issues on. This is not a federal program. You have seen this way too much with everything there. Once the federal government gets involved in a process, you can't shake those teeth loose. They grab you around the ankle and they tear you down. You spend more time in administering the funds, writing the programs, writing the after-action reports, that the money isn't worth it.
Okay. Let's take a break a minute and I want to introduce my timekeeper here, Tricia Purcell Heath from the Chamber staff. And I appreciate all you folks adhering to the time limits. It's been, I do appreciate it, and it makes this job a lot easier. I'm going to start here with, I believe I'll start with Mr. Williams, work my way back down again. That's easier for me to do because, as this thing goes on, I get more likely to make a mistake. How would you rate the school system's current accessibility to parents and the general public? What ideas do you have for making sure parents stay connected to schools?
Accessibility, parents' accessibility to school administrators could be improved greatly. One of the biggest problems I think we have in the school district and other school districts that I've visited or worked in is communication. 95% of the calls that I get from parents could have been solved at the local school had they simply been able to sit down with the assistant principal or the principal and worked out the issues. Miscommunication. I think a lot of our parents feel that they're being talked down to when they go to the schools. I've heard that constantly. I think that communication is the key to all of this, but it has to be, communication is not one person talking to another. It's two people talking with each other and coming to a common understanding. If you could work out the communication issues between parents, teachers, administrators, we would solve a lot of the problems at the local level.
Mr.
Would
Reddick.
you mind repeating that question again?
Okay. And I think basically the question was, if I can find it here, because I want to read it exactly. How would you rate the school system's accessibility to parents and the general public? What ideas do you have for making sure parents stay connected to schools?
Okay, thank you. Thanks to technology, we really have increased communication as far as typing in a few words and keywords and parents being able to access everything from homework to student progress. I know the parent portal that is in Power School has really made a big difference for parents. There are some parents who really like to stay connected daily. All they have to do is a few keystrokes. They can go to the school website. They can check daily on their child's progress, and I think that's a really important thing. One of the things that and I think Bob's right, sometimes parents do get turned off by communication. Of course, communication is the answer to just about every problem, but I think as long as we celebrate the learning that children experience at school, I think parents are going to keep coming. Parents love to come to a play. They love musicals. They love the kinds of things where it results in a celebration of learning. I don't know of any parent who won't go to their child's school to see what they have created. And, one of the things I think we can do a better job of as far as parent involvement is schools probably need to do more of that kind of thing. As, show and tell is one thing, one step, but to watch a finished product that a child has completed as a result of all the work and all the things they've done, that's priceless.
Mr. Lanier?
As I've joined this race and I go around the community and I introduce myself, first reaction is, another politician, new. And then they see the words on the bottom of this card, Board of Education. Their hand immediately opens. They literally snatch the card from my hand, and then they express to me precisely what they are experiencing concerning their school system. And it's largely a disconnect concerning communication, who understands what, in the dynamics of what's going on in their situation. And being a part of the school system once upon a time, I'm able to describe for them the process they have to go through. They are immediately relieved that someone has given them the information as to where to go, how the process works. This thing doesn't have to be that contentious. It's that simple.
Thank you. Mr. Hudson?
As a dad, the number one person in the school system to me is the teacher that my son has, or the several teachers that my son have. And communication with them, the communication between them and my family, what's going on right now. And after that, it's the principal. I enjoy getting a phone call every Sunday night. It's a robocall from my son's principal. It tells me what's happening during the week, things that we should be aware of. I don't know that every school does that, but they should. Regular updates are important. Even apps. There's something called Edmodo. Edmodo can be added to your phone, and you can keep in contact with what's happening in your child's classroom. We need to make that app available. Be able to access homework. Power School is another one. But let me tell you, the best culture of communication is not going to be successful unless the teacher also has the time to communicate. What I'm hearing from our classrooms is that there seems to have been in the past an endless series of initiatives, one great thing after another, where we're trying to be all things to all people instead of focusing and concentrating on just a few. And one of those few things is great communication with the parent, maybe through technology. Time is a critical factor. Parental involvement is very important. Even in the issue of safety, at Stateside Elementary School, they had something called watchdogs, dads of great students. And the dads just came out and was an extra set of eyes, not armed, but an extra set of eyes on campus. Participation by parents is very important.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lanier?
Everyone communicates with principals and teachers on a daily basis. At any given time, they can have any given amount of appreciation, and then on the other hand, have that much of a disconnect or dispute. Part of the problem is this. We as board members, once we are elected, we have to take into consideration how often we are accessible to the community. This is a situation where we are elected and we are responsible to the people who elect us. Current general statute requires that we are limited simply to time of board meetings and trainings. For all the other time, we have no power or authority to be talking to anyone. This is important. It has to change.
Thank you. Mr. Hudson? We may be out of rebuttals after yours.
Okay.
Okay.
I would just like to say that I've worked with elected officials for 25 years. And it's my understanding as an elected official that I would have, provided the public sees fit to let me work for them in this regard, I would have constituents. And the constituents ought to have a way to get up with me. And if anyone calls me, I can find out an answer, get them to the right person to get an answer. I won't always know the answer, and quite frankly, throughout my entire life, I can't admit that I've always known the answer, but I've tried really hard to make sure that that person got an answer and to close the loop afterwards so that there was that communication. People have problems. You know, this is life, and a lot of things happen in life, and a lot of things happen in the school system. I expect that as members of the Board of Education, it's our job to stay connected with our constituents to make sure that the school system is performing in the way that as a governing body, we believe it should go.
Thank you. Mr. Lanier?
Yes.
Nothing else? Okay, I'm sorry, I just got a little bit. Okay, look, there's a lot of good topics left here. A lot of them have been submitted by the audience. We don't have time to go through all of them. I do want to talk a little bit about one topic that has come up and nationally lately, and that is vocational education and trades. And we will start this with Mr. Reddick, work to Mr. Williams, and then go to Mr. Lear and work to Mr. Hudson. What do you think about the concept of a single school, a single high school in most cases, that's focused on vocational education and trades?
Elliot, we're talking about a center or just a public school that is focused on trade?
It would be a functioning high school that would be focused on trade and vocations.
I know that Onslow County is, we're really ahead of the game as far as what we provide for the children. The building out at Burton Park, I know, is under construction. They're at least breaking ground out there, and that's going to be probably going to be a model for the state as far as vocational education. But as far as having a school, a regular high school or middle school, I guess, that focuses on vocational education, I wouldn't have a problem with it at all. I do think, though, you've got to look at some problems related to that. If it's a neighborhood school, then in your district there, those are your only choices. So that would be a drawback. But as far as expanding, what we already do in vocational education, absolutely. I do believe Burton Park and the Skills Center there is going to be part of the solution. I don't think it'll be all the solution, because I think parents, from what I hear from parents, is that they would like for their children to have more choices at each of the schools. So maybe the one school with all the vocation, maybe not so much.
Mr. Williams?
I don't think that a school dedicated to that's called community college, and that's where they need to go. We are creating the regional skill center that will service Onslow, Jones County, and Dupin County, as well as Camp Lejeune. And that skill center, when it comes online next January, will have basic elements of what you're talking about. If you want to learn a skill, you can go to that school, and you'll be able to come out of there with a certificate, a trade, employment as you graduate. With regards to a school, the logistics of trying to create a high school that would simply be focused on the trades, I just don't, logistically, I don't know how you could do that.
Right.
We have 7 high schools throughout here. You would have to have everybody either being bused or brought to and from that school on a daily basis in order to accomplish that one process. We do the same thing right now. Learning a trade is not a 5 or a 7-hour school day process. You need the basics. You still need to get all of the other education process. Learning a trade has more to do it. History, math, English are all integral to learning in the environment of learning. The basic agreement after that, if you've got something that you can learn a trade, is gravy on top of that.
Mr. Lanier?
I graduated from Roger L. Putnam Vocational Technical High School in Springfield, Massachusetts. It incorporated 1 week of academics and the following week of trades training. The trades, they ran the gamut from nursing to auto mechanics to auto body to physical education and various other things. It is doable, but it takes time. As far as I think community colleges, the name in and of itself entails what it should be doing. Community colleges, in my point of view, are preparatory areas for higher learning, where some students may have had a shortfall coming out of the other end of high school where they can't quite make it into, say, an Ivy League school. This is a stopgap so that they can get the necessary skill sets so that they can get higher training, so that they can move on to higher level learning. But as far as trades are concerned, the high school level is the appropriate place for it. In some places, those basics that Bob was talking about are done at the junior high or middle school level in smaller trade shops where just basic skills are used. So there's a lot of application, a lot of opportunity to work with things.
Mr. Hudson?
I've had the real privilege of working with some wonderful tradesmen in my career. When I was assistant superintendent over at the school system of auxiliary services or business and property, the maintenance department was there, and there were plumbers and electricians and people that could do absolutely amazing things. There was talent on hand that could build a school from the ground up. And those individuals made a wonderful career for themselves. The truth is, college is not for every person. People are different. And my own father, he didn't have a chance to go to college. He had a 6th grade education. And he was a farmer and later a car salesman, and he knew a lot of stuff, one of the wisest men I've ever known. And I would like to say that I believe that we need to continue to make hefty investments in the area of skills training. I believe that Onslow County is enormous. We've all been slapping up a whole lot of signs all over this county, and trust me, we'll take them down. We will after the election. But this is a big county. If you drive from Sneads Ferry to White Oak River Road, you'll see how big this place is. And busing those kids from all across the county to one place may not be as efficient as continuing to have good programs in individual high schools that feed into either the skills center or feed into the community college. Onslow County Schools and Coastal Carolina Community College have had a really great relationship in the past, and I believe that will only continue to grow as we have an early college high school there on campus at Coastal Carolina. And I believe we can together really prepare people for the trades as well as college.
We're real short on time, folks. I promise you a minute and a half for summation, but I'm gonna take 30 seconds back. Give you a minute. If you will, Mr. Williams, we'll start with you and we'll go to the end again. And I apologize, but let's keep it on schedule.
Not a problem at all. Go to my website, electbobwilliams.org. You'll find out more about me. But better than that, go to the other Facebook pages and the other websites for the other candidates. We've got a great slate of candidates sitting at this table right now. Somebody from this table is going to get elected. That's just the way the numbers are going to work out. Somebody from this table is going to go forward into the November primary, and somebody will get elected in that. Get informed. Find out who your candidates are, whether or not they, or I, more particularly, because I'm asking for your vote, meet your expectations and your desires for education for your children. If you do that, and you go in and become an informed voter, you will be doing something that 95% of the voters in this county don't do.
Thank you. Mr. Reddick?
On May 8th, the citizens of Onslow County will go to the polls and they will vote for a person or persons they feel like can lead the school system. I do know, there are basically 5 broad areas that members of the Board of Education must address, and we've already mentioned those. I do believe that a person on the Board of Education has to work collaboratively with other board members. They have to ask the hard questions. They have to do research. I know that anyway, the board meetings I've attended, somebody's done some research, and I think that's very, very important. The only thing I can ask you as a candidate for the Board of Education is that I can just say I'll promise to do my homework. I'd love research. I don't mind doing it, and I'll do the best I can. And I do believe that if we want excellence in the classroom, we've got to see excellence in the boardroom.
Thank you. Mr. Lanier?
I spent a lot of time over my lifetime being a leader and a facilitator. It requires paying attention, listening to appropriate feedback, and then helping everybody to achieve the goals that are set before them. Please do, like Bob Williams said here, go to these sites and find out who these candidates are, to include myself, because there's a lot of good information out there. It's a good way to know what we think and how we're going to respond. It's our responsibility, as this card says, to have a environment free of distractions, fiscally responsible and accountable, professionally competitive, curriculum specific and age appropriate, and academically successful.
Thanks, sir.
Welcome.
Mr. Hudson.
Well, I appreciate this evening. Thank you all for helping us present ourselves to the public. I feel very strongly about the Onslow County school system. Without the Onslow County school system, I could not have had my career. I did not grow up in a wealthy home. My only path to a career was through education. And it's been remarkable for me to be able to once again work with the school system about 10 years ago, and now to be a participant with my son. I'd like to leave you with two quotes. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "A genuine leader is not a searcher for consensus, but a molder of consensus." If elected to the school board, I will work with our Board of County Commissioners. I'll work with the other members of the school board to build consensus around the topics that face us. Secondly, Billy Graham said, when wealth is lost, nothing is lost. When health is lost, something is lost. But when character is lost, all is lost. I will be an elected official that the citizens of Onslow County never have to worry about in terms of how I will represent the dignity of the office. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all candidates. You were fantastic in how you responded and adhering to the limits. And now I will turn it over to our president of the chamber, Lorette Legan.
Thank you. And gentlemen, thank y'all for participating in our forum. It was very, very informative. I also want to once again thank our corporate sponsor, Duke Energy, our media sponsor, the Daily News, and our partner, the City of Jacksonville. And everyone remember, your vote does count. Absentee ballots are now available, and if you wish to do the early voting, the dates, times, and locations are all available on the Onslow County Board of Elections website. Election Day is May 8th from 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. at your local precinct. If you are unsure of your voting precinct, once again, just go to the Board of Elections website and you will be able to find it. On behalf of the Jacksonville Onslow Chamber of Commerce, thank you for joining our Meet the Candidates Forum.